All right, I have a beefy topic for you for the last topic of today's show. It is gonna, I don't know if it's gonna be that long, but we'll just see. I'll get going on it and we'll just kind of see. So, you might remember that the Congress right now, mostly controlled by the Democrats, is trying to push through two infrastructure bills right now. There's the 1.5 trillion infrastructure bill, that is the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Fun fact: there's only about 800 billion dollars of new spending. Um, a lot of that spending is reused from the CARES Act, but that aside, right? So anyway, it's tagged at 1.5 trillion dollars, although that's really not really what it is, as I just laid out. The bipartisan infrastructure deal, essentially, it does one of two things. The first is to provide updates to our physical infrastructure, and two, then privatize a lot of that infrastructure. So obviously, privatization is bad in many cases, and infrastructure is perhaps the zenith of things that should not be privatized for a bunch of reasons. But you're probably wondering why you don't see anything on the whiteboard labeled about infrastructure, because the segment is called "Do You Like Tolls?" Because if you like tolls, this deal's for you. If you don't like tolls, this deal can burn in hell. And the reason I say that is because the privatization of infrastructure, roads, bridges, and things like that, requires, like all other sectors of the private market, for profit to be generated. Well, once you've built a road and you've exhausted the government contract, how do you make money off of a road that you own? The road still needs to be maintained, right? You have to pay for that. You have to pay for people to scrape off the top in the wonderful way that capitalism works. So how do you make that money? Oh, right, tolls. And everyone just loves toll roads, right? You just go out and drive and you're like, damn, I wish I hit a toll road today. No, of course you don't. Everyone hates tolls. So the reason this is labeled "Do You Like Tolls?" is because if we actually go through with the large scale privatization of our infrastructure, the way that they will make money back, the investors and the people who are running it, who own it, the way that they will make profit from the ownership of these pieces of infrastructure is to charge us to use them, right? You'll be paying tolls for the rest of your life. Now, if you have public infrastructure that we all pay for collectively through our taxes, then, right, we don't necessarily need tolls. We still have tolls, right, for some things. It helps maintain the roads and lower taxes in other places. It's especially true with interstate roads, right, where multiple states are maintaining a road. But they're few and far between. There aren't huge amounts of tolls everywhere. And part of the reason for that is because we've spent the money to build and maintain our infrastructure. Now, you can see that we've maintained it poorly, right? Anyone who lives pretty much anywhere will tell you that the airport near them, or the roads near them, or the bridge near them is just not as good as it used to be. And that's all true. But the constant flow of money that is required to maintain infrastructure is not going to come through a capitalist model. It never has, it never will. And once you privatize these roads, and these roads will still need the same level of maintenance, who's going to pay for them? We're all going to pay for them. And by the way, not only are we going to pay for them, we're going to pay for whoever it is that owns them to skim off the top, right? Because profit, it's about profit. It would become a capitalist enterprise, which requires profit, right? Oftentimes requires higher profits. Those tolls would provide the profit that is required for a private capital industry, including our roads and bridges. So to the extent possible, we need to push back on privatized roads. If a privatized road comes up near you that requires tolls, look for a bypass. And there's an easy way to do this. If on most GPSs nowadays will have an option that says avoid tolls. So you can actually protest the privatization of infrastructure. Now, mind you, sometimes you'll be protesting tolls in general, but that's fine. The truth is, we pay money into the system, generally speaking, for these roads and bridges and airports and things to work for us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the rest of existence and eternity, and get maintained and things like that. So if that is going to be the case, which it is going to be forever, government will always have some involvement in roads and bridges, then we should not have to pay to use them except for in the taxes that we pay on a regular basis. And there's no real good reason for us to do anything otherwise. So quite frankly, when the bipartisan infrastructure deal goes through and this privatization begins, make sure you set your GPS to avoid toll roads. We can protest this. We can show solidarity with each other. We can show solidarity with our government, as dysfunctional as sometimes it may seem, and for the public utility and maintenance of roads, highways, bridges, and airports by avoiding tolls and avoiding privatized infrastructure. We actually have the power to do this. We may not have the power to change it, but we do have the power to bankrupt those people to the extent where they want to sell it back to the taxpayer. And once it's public, then we have a larger say in whether we can, remove the profit motive from these particular enterprises. And to the extent possible, we should do that. We should always make sure that these public goods, roads, bridges, airports, ports of entry, and things like that are maintained by us as individuals. People should not profit off of this. And by the way, part of the taxes that come from this doesn't have to be from individuals, right? We can tax corporations. Corporations use roads, bridges, airports, and highways too. And in fact, oftentimes they're using it at a higher rate than we are. So why don't they have to pay for it, right? We can engender a system through infrastructure legislation and tax codes and things where we actually get to benefit from the fact that corporations use our roads and bridges so much, often to deleterious effects on them. And we can benefit from that by taxing them and by forcing them to pay their fair share or more than fair share. We pay enough taxes here. We don't need tolls. We don't need extra taxes. We need public infrastructure maintained by our government, paid for by the corporations who steal our time and labor and wages and money from the system, right? They use this too. They have much deeper pockets than us. They should be paying for it because they use it. And they definitely use it more consistently and more regularly and more damagingly than you and I do as individuals. So it makes more sense for them to pay for it and less sense for us to pay for it, especially in this system where we're constantly having issues with money anyway. So